Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in MLB This Week. It's the MLB This Week show, talking all about baseball. My name is Rich Baxter,
And I'm Gary Mack.
and we're joining you again talking about the wonderful world of baseball. And Gary Mack, over the past few days, we had a trade deadline hit the fan here.
Well, big week every year in baseball, Rich, with the trade deadline coming up. And this was really quite something this year. Usually you don't see either this many big name players going in midstream, but a lot of pitching moved and big names too. David Price was traded by the Tampa Bay Rays, and he went to the Detroit Tigers. And let's not forget that John Lester also he got traded. He went to the Oakland A's, and Rich, I think they've positioned themselves, the Tigers and the A's, as the teams to beat in the American League, as they just went hog wild in this trading deadline.
Yes, they did, and a lot of the times these teams pick up these players for next to nothing for their run to the playoffs and beyond. And then, if they're successful in those playoffs, they end up signing these players. But some of them are coming off of contract, so you never know. They call them rental players. So, as you mentioned, two of the top names in baseball, pitchers, actually three of them, David Price, John Lackey, and John Lester, the Red Sox really divesting themselves of starting pitching as the trade deadline wound down. And not a lot of early trades happened this year, Gary. It was all sort of down to the wire stuff.
Yeah, it seemed to all happen at the last day, and lots of pitches moved. I mean, Samardzija from the Cubs went a little bit earlier, and Houston Street, relief pitcher, closer, he left. He went earlier before the deadline. But as you say, Rich, a lot of the really big names went on the trade deadline day, and contending teams made their deals. And I think the Cardinals made that deal really out of desperation because they gave up a lot to get Lackey, giving up Joe Kelly a promising arm, as well as Alan Craig, who's a pretty decent hitter. He's having a down year this year, but he's a pretty good ball player. So really a lot of movement that was unexpected. And unfortunately, our teams, or fortunately, depending upon how you want to look at it, both stood pat
Yeah,
in frenzy. But sometimes that's a good thing, too.
absolutely. And of course, Gary is referencing, he does a podcast called Mets Musings following the Mets. And I do my own independent show called Phillies Talk Podcast. And yeah, as you said, Gary, both of our NL teams couldn't move or attract anybody to the team. Kind of strange, especially when there was a lot of talk where both teams might be doing something, especially the Mets. They're still not out of this race so far. They're a few games back, but still not out of this race yet.
Yeah, very surprising, but I don't think they really had a good matchup. And I think what they're trying to do is really the type of deal that gets done in the off season. If they want to make a big deal, the rumors were flying about Tulowitzki and Carlos Gonzalez coming here for a package, and you don't usually see those kind of deals in mid-season. But of course, that was proven wrong by some of the deals that went on by the trading deadline. And Rich, let me also mention that the Yankees made a couple of deals. They got Stephen Drew from the Red Sox in I guess you'd call that odd bedfellows trade, because they usually don't do that. It's been a while since they last traded within the division and within the rivalry that they have. And they also acquired Martin Prado from Arizona, I believe it was. So Yankees made a couple moves too. It doesn't seem to be really helping them that much. Also, they got Chris Capuano. Let me throw that in there. Also, they purchased him, I believe, or signed him to a minor league contract. He made a couple of starts. So I don't know how big a deal it's going to help them, but Detroit and Oakland. I mean, Detroit has three of the last Cy Young Award winners on their roster now, in their pitching staff, and Oakland has just got like 37 starters there. I mean, they're just loaded, and of course they gave up a big bat in Cespedes, but they scored 8 runs the next day without losing anything. So it's going to be some race, but those are the teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you'd have to declare Oakland a winner at that trade deadline. Of course, Billy Beane always seems to make the good moves, and doesn't seem to cost him a whole lot of money when he makes his moves. So they're still on top of the AL West, only by a game now on the LA Angels. But yeah, they stocked up with starting pitching. They gave up a bat, home run hitter in Cespedes, and it seems like the Red Sox were looking for a home run hitter, so to speak, since they lost Big Papi, Mo Vaughn over the years. They haven't really been able to replace that guy, so maybe they have somebody in Cespedes now.
Yes, and they wanted to get younger, and pretty amazing how they went from worst to first to win the World Championship last season, and now they're going from first to worst. So I don't know if any team ever did that, worst to first and then first to worst. But
Yeah.
they're definitely going through retooling, and they do a fine job of it. I mean, they practically traded their complete pitching staff within a few weeks, and including a relief pitcher, Andrew Miller, they traded. So very interesting trading season, and of course deals can still be made, but they have to pass through waivers.
Yes, they do. We'll have to see during the month of August. Sometimes some interesting trades can go down with teams, and we'll just have to keep our eyes open and see when the next one will come down the road for us.
Yep, we'll have to keep an eye on that one.
Yep, well, we're moving on with our next story here. Speaking of those Oakland A's, they were beaten by one single player the other day. Raul Ibanez hits a long home run on a Saturday night to beat the Oakland A's, and he's back in baseball, 42 years old. And what a success story Raul Ibanez is, the game winner against the A's for the Kansas City Royals.
I guess Raul's going after Julio Franco's record there now, but always a good, dangerous hitter. Struggled, I guess, a little bit last year that nobody really picked him up, or struggled at the beginning of this year. And here he gets a chance and comes back with a game winner.
Yeah, a lot of these guys just don't want to go away from the game, and Ibanez really doesn't look too much different than he did a few years ago. So it'll be interesting to see if he can last the season with the Kansas City Royals, and if he will come back for yet another year in 2015. We'll have to see. Stranger things have happened.
And with the DH, Rich, there's no reason, as long as his hand-eye coordination is still good, and you don't have to play the field. It does help a lot.
Yes, indeed. Well, we have a story for our listeners here about the Astros, and tell us about that. Could they be jealous?
Well, Rich, this is probably one of the strangest stories we've heard this year. And of course, everything is anonymous, but the number of Astros players were displeased because Mark Apple, the number 1 overall pick in the 2013 draft, was promoted to Double-A Corpus Christi on Saturday, the last Saturday, despite posting a 9.74 ERA and a 1.92 WHIP in 44 and a third innings at High A Lancaster. Apparently, there's also there was some discontent about him being in Houston in the clubhouse after he was invited to Minute Maid Park to throw a bullpen session in front of Astros coaches and front office personnel. And the big question is, what's the big deal about that? It kind of makes sense. The kid's struggling. He's #1 draft pick, and wouldn't you want your top coaches and everybody looking at him to see? And apparently, the players took. They weren't pleased about it. They were unhappy that he was there. They were unhappy that he was promoted, and I just think it's one of the weird stories. And look, this is a kid that if they straighten him out, could help them down the line and help them win big. And for the some players to be jealous about it or to be ticked off that he was there, it just seemed a little ridiculous to me. But that's the jealous Astros. And actually, as a footnote to all of that, he pitched 5 scoreless innings, I believe, last night in his debut at Corpus Christi. So I guess he can kind of turn around and give the Astros players the Bronx cheer or whatever, or give them a little razzing, because he did his job. He went out there through 5 scoreless innings. But I just thought it was, you're making enough money, and they don't say, of course, who the players were. Maybe it was pitchers that were nervous. Maybe they felt he was getting special treatment. But to me, if I'm making an investment in #1 draft pick, and I'm bringing him into the home team town to look at him with the top personnel in the organization, I don't see anything wrong with that.
Yeah, and it's probably a testament to some of the players on the Astros are younger themselves, so a lot of that attention probably went on that player, and they got a little miffed with it. Well, they'll have to learn to deal with it. Probably going to happen a lot.
Yeah, welcome to the real world.
Well, we want to thank you for tuning in to MLB This Week. You can listen to us here on our YouTube broadcast. We usually do the shows on Sunday evenings at around 7:30 p.m. Eastern. You can join us live, or you can watch our shows already recorded on YouTube, or, of course, listen to our podcasts. A lot of great places you can hear that on iTunes, on Podomatic.com. Just search MLB This Week. And Gary, I'd like to hear from some of our listeners out there. What do they think about some of the things that are happening in baseball? Maybe something that they'd like us to talk about on the show.
Yeah, that would be great. And, Rich, they could send us an email if they like at talk@mlbthisweek.com, and we'll read it on the air. And send a question, a comment, or anything along that line. We'll be happy to read it on the air.
Yes, indeed. So we're carrying on with the program here, and Jim Thome, he retired the other night, a Cleveland Indian. Number 25 was retired by the Indians. He signed a 1-day contract at home plate to make it official, and that's what it takes to have an Indians number retired. They need to retire as a Cleveland Indian. They can't play for other teams and then, like Thome did for the Phillies and a couple of other teams, the Orioles at the end of his career. So he did sign that 1-day contract, and most teams are like that. And he is now officially a retired number, with number 25 there for the Indians. And he also was unveiled with a great statue out, I believe, in the center field location at the center field wall, right behind the center field wall at Progressive Field. A lifelike statue of Jim Thome as well. Didn't wait long for that statue, Gary.
Yeah, that's very cool though that they did that, and I guess they had planned that for quite some time, because you don't whip up a statue like that right away.
No, that's for sure.
Good for him, a good guy, and really made his way around different teams, not because he wasn't very good, it was just because he was good, and really played for a number of teams, like you said, a big part of the Philly team for a number of years. And it's very cool with Cleveland. And it's neat this the new thing with this these 1 day contracts and retiring at a certain play. I think that's really great, and I hope we see more of that as time goes on. Because there are guys that mean a lot to a certain team, and they do go to different teams, and it's nice to see him come home.
Yes, it is. And Jim Thome is one of the greats of the game. They say his first year for eligibility for the Hall of Fame isn't until 2017. And of course, Thome had a very long career in baseball, 22 seasons. Seems like he's been playing forever. From 91 all the way to 2012. He ended his career in Baltimore, the last 28 games. The Phillies had signed him. He was doing pretty good for the Phillies as well. He had 5 home runs in 30 games in 2012. And he also contributed with 15 RBIs. So Thome was still the home run hitter at 41 years old. And he even did quite well with the Orioles. He hit 3 home runs for them with 10 RBIs before his season came to an end and his career came to an end. He ends with 612 home runs and 1,699 RBIs.
Couldn't get that one more just to make it a nice.
Yeah, really. A sacrifice fly or something. Maybe he could have played for the Indians a couple of games to put that over the 1,700 mark, but I like to look at some of the Hall of Fame statistics they have on a site called baseballreference.com. You can search a player's name, then you go down to where the bottom of the page is for a particular player, and you can see how they rank up in the Hall of Fame type of statistics. And it's very interesting. There's about 4 measurements for the Hall of Fame, and Thome is over those measurements in 2 of the 4. So according to this, he's in some good company. Similar batters were Frank Thomas, Reggie Jackson, Mickey Mantle, and Willie McCovey. Going to be interesting to see because there's a couple statistics where he didn't really do too well in, but a lot of people kind of think he's a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, his batting average might hold him back a little bit, but I think the 612 home runs is usually the key. I don't think if you hit over 500, that's usually the golden ticket into the Hall of Fame. But not too many guys that hit. In fact, I'm not sure if there's any that hit over 500 that aren't in the Hall of Fame other than Barry Bonds, and that's it. That's the only one I can think of, really. I don't think McGuire hit that many. So, pretty interesting. Thome played a long time, and it all depends how the sports writers look at him. If they look at him as a guy that just hung around to get statistics, then he could have a hard time. But I don't know. He had some dominating years there and some good years with high averages, if you look. So, I think he's got a shot.
Yes, I do too. And if you watch Ryan Howard, the way he points his bat, it's almost a carbon copy. I think Thome actually taught him that. Thome came up with the Phillies in 2004 when the Phillies opened a brand new stadium, and Ryan Howard just happened to come up around the same time. So Thome was sort of a mentor of Ryan Howard in his early years with the Phillies, and he'll have that same bat point as you've seen Thome over the years, because that's where he learned it from. Jim Thome taught him, to focus on that and hold that bat high up in the air and point it towards, the third deck, so to speak.
Interesting. So, I thought he played longer with the Phillies, 3+ years with the Phillies. I thought he was longer with them, but caused enough damage against my Mets, so.
Yeah, he actually played with the Phillies from 2003, closed out the Vet in 2003 when they closed that stadium down, and he opened the new one. He was supposed to be one of their keys to early success once they opened Citizens Bank Park, but that didn't come for a number of years, 4 years later actually from when they opened the ballpark. But Jim Thome was already gone. They had dealt him back to the American League and the Chicago White Sox for the 2006 season, and then of course Ryan Howard was on his way to becoming a home run hitter as well. So it's nice to see Jim Thome being recognized by the Indians. He played 13 years there, and out of his 600 and some odd home runs, let me see if I can find his total with the Indians here. He hit 612 total. 337 of those were hit with the Cleveland Indians, and he also hit an incredible 281 homers for the Phillies. So he really, wherever he went, he really, 101 homers for the Phillies, and that's still a lot of home runs.
Sure is. Over 3+ years. Yeah, that's a good 30+ span there. So.
Sure. So he was cranking them out of there for the Phillies for a number of years. He hit 47 in 2003. That was the last year that Veterans Stadium was open, and that was a huge place. And then he followed that up the next season with 42 home runs for the first year in Citizens Bank Park. His first season with the White Sox, he actually equaled that number with 42 home runs, and then from that point on, from 2007 on up, he had a little lower of a home run total. That's when he started not hitting as many, and I think he had a few injuries in there. So we'll have to see if Jim Thome's an instant Hall of Famer in 2017. And Gary, you have our next story for us.
Well, Rich, at that new rule that they put into effect came up to bite again, the blocking of home plate rule 7.13, and we've talked about this numerous times, and this happened in a game with the Miami Marlins and the Cincinnati Reds. It was the Reds were trailing 1-0 in the top of the eighth. The Cincinnati had the bases loaded, 1 out. Todd Frazier lifted a fly ball and team Carlos Stanton in right field. Zach Cosart attempted to tag up and score from third base before Stanton's throw easily beat him to the plate. He was tagged out by catcher Jeff Mathis without sliding for what looked to be like an inning double play. And I mean, he was out by 10 feet. But the umpires, the Cincinnati Reds manager, came out to complain. He argued that Mathis was blocking the lane to the plate for the run of the score, and after 6 minutes and 10 seconds, they did a review. 6 minutes and 10 seconds, it was an umpire review. The call by home plate umpire Mike Winters was overturned, and Cosart was ruled safe. Sacrifice fly, they tied up the game and eventually scored 2 other runs and ended up winning the game. And Marlins manager Mike Redmond, he went nuts. He came out of the dugout, ripped his hat off, ripped his shirt. He was just furious, and he was promptly ejected from the game. But this is another example of this rule. They have to clarify it or do something with it, because it's literally ridiculous. The guy was out by 10 feet.
Yeah.
Yes, in the true letter of the ruling, he was in the lane a second before he got the ball, and that's what they called it on, but the runner was nowhere to be seen at that point in time. And, and once he got the ball, he was in the lane. The runner should have ran him over then.
Yeah.
But I don't know. This is another one of those cases where it's so obvious that the guy was going to be out, and how can you call it on a technicality like this? It's just crazy. And I don't know what they're going to do, but I think they're going to have to review this law. It is so clouded with misinformation and confusion that they have to clarify it or do something with it, because this is just it's going to kill the whole
The game
yeah, the
itself.
game.
Yeah, one of those plays happened a week ago when I was up at the Phillies game, and I saw it from my very eyes. There was, I think we talked about this on last week's show, there was a bloop fly ball hit. Ryan Howard was running out the ball like at half speed. He thought it was going to be caught. Second baseman drifted out into right field area, and he dropped the ball. He didn't make the catch. Ryan Howard heard the fans go crazy. He didn't even turn his head around and look. He just started motoring towards third, and he was waved home. It was out by 15, 18 feet, but because the catcher caught the ball in his path, didn't allow him a lane to the plate, which is, like you and I have been brought up with baseball over the years, and even the manager of the Phillies joked after that game. Of course, the call went in the Phillies' favor, but as you said, there was a long delay, about 3.5 to 4 minutes, I believe, in the Phillies' case, and they had no alternative but to call Howard safe, and he was out by a mile. In any other ball game prior to this year, he would have been out just with no questions asked. But this new rule, as you said, it's been clarified now. Is it a good rule? No, obviously not. If you're tagging a player out that's 20 feet from home plate, why not send everybody home and test these throws? Because if they come up the line, you're gonna be called safe. They have no alternative but to call you safe from that umpiring crew in New York if you're blocking the lane.
And not that it was another example today, but even in the Met game today, there was a play where the ball was up the line a little bit, the catcher came up, but he completely missed the ball because he did one of these Olay jobs to try to catch it and avoid the runner, and the ball went right by the glove. So, I mean, that's not part of the game either. I mean, I know they're trying to avoid these collisions and stuff, but I don't think this is the way to go with it. Either make it a slide-only rule. You have to slide into home plate. You can't have collisions. But this rule is too confusing, and it goes against everything that most of these players have been taught their entire life.
Yeah, and as we talked about in last week's show, I think the only way they can come up with a suitable type of solution is draw a box in the area where a catcher can stand, and then it becomes much more easier for the catcher and the player that's running home to know what to expect and where everybody's supposed to be. Because obviously the catcher now is supposed to be a foot or two in front of home plate and not where they normally were, blocking home plate, so they get run down, and players that are running them down sometimes got hurt. So and it turned into like a football type of a situation, but that's the way baseball's been for 100+ years prior to this year. So we'll have to see. I think they're going to review this rule at the end of the season, see where it stands and what changes, if any, are going to be made to it, and if they need to change it. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to do something with it. Like you say, draw a box, make it a slide-only rule. If you come in standing, you're out. I mean, they have to put some of the onus too on the runners. It can't all be on the catcher, because that's not fair either.
Yeah, exactly.
And whether or not what are you going to do? Are you going to have a pitcher come up right almost next to the catcher in case the throw comes up the line, and you know what I mean? Instead of backing up home plate, I mean it's just going to wreak havoc because he can't reach in. Somebody's going to get hurt worse this way, because I can see a catcher trying to reach a throw like this, and get hit like Cliff Floyd got hit first base that time there.
Yep.
and have some major problems, separate a shoulder, break an arm, or worse, and then what are they going to do? Because that's going to prove this whole rule is ridiculous. So, as you say, I'm sure they're going to review it at the end of the year and decide whether it's good, bad, or
And and it's interesting that when you're actually sitting there watching the game, not necessarily at home, but at the stadium, things happen so fast that sometimes you don't even know what happened until you see the replay now. Because, like I said, when I was sitting at the stadium myself, Howard was out by a mile, but yet right after the play, Ryan Sandberg came running out of the dugout. Of course, you have the stadium monitors now that used to never replay those type of plays because they didn't want the umps getting into trouble with the fans. Now they are replaying them right on the regular field, big giant screen TVs and any television in the stadium to make their point. Sometimes these teams that are the teams that are it's going to benefit, obviously. So very strange now. And you don't see many umpire-manager arguments anymore so much that you used to.
No, they've taken that out of the game a little bit with the review. And also, it is a little silly, though, how after a close play, the manager has to come out and stand around until they get the call from the video guy. And
yeah, that to me, like, I think we've talked about this, is a farce because they're waiting to understand whether or not they should dispute the play because they've already had somebody look at it and tell them yes or no.
Yeah.
So that kind of screws up the numbers with plays being disputed, so to speak, and success rates. You can throw that out the window because these teams are having up to a minute sometimes to dispute the call. And like you said, they're looking back at the bench. Somebody's in charge of telling the manager yes or no, don't dispute it, or go ahead and dispute it. So
right. Exactly. So it's all part of the modern baseball era, I guess.
Yeah, we'll have to see where this goes as well. Maybe they'll adjust that a little bit. I'm sure Major League Baseball is aware of the fact that some of these managers know the outcome of the decision before they're even disputing it. So we'll keep an eye on that for you, and a whole lot more. And it was a great show number 20 of MLB This Week. And before we go, Gary, let's just go through with some of the wild card standings for August 3rd, 2014. We're down to the wire now. It's about an 8-week run to the end of the season or so, till October. And so far we have the Baltimore Orioles in the driver's seat so far, the Detroit Tigers, division leaders, along with the Oakland A's. The two wild card teams at this point on August 3rd would be the LA Angels and the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah, both teams are hanging tough in there, and both good teams. So the Angels are still snapping at the heels of the Oakland A's, and National League is still tight and interesting. Washington and Atlanta are battling it out in the East, in the National League, with Milwaukee hanging in there in the Central, and the Dodgers have made a remarkable run, and they're in the top. And as far as the wild card goes in the National League, Atlanta's still up there.
Uh-huh. And we have San Francisco.
Yeah, San Francisco and St. Louis. Atlanta just lost 5 straight. So I apologize for that. And Pittsburgh's still there. They're only a half a game out of the wild card and had a virtual tie with St. Louis. So it's really going to be an exciting second half, if you will, as we go down to the wire. And, Rich, if you look at the wild card, there's still a lot of teams involved.
Oh, yeah, there's a ton of teams. Just name a couple of them in the American League. Kansas City Royals are still in it. They're a game and a half out. The Yankees are right in it. Seattle Mariners are right in it. Cleveland came out of nowhere with a 56 and 55 record. They're 3 games back in the wild card. So a lot of these teams are not out of it yet. By no means. Looking over at the National League, it's the Pittsburgh Pirates just under the wire there by a half a game. Then the Braves, as you said, Gary, they're 3-7 in their last 10, losers of their last 5 in a row. Didn't help them, but they're still a game and a half out in the wild card. Cincinnati Reds 3.5, Miami 5.5, and the New York Mets 6.5 back. And those 5 teams or so are still in it.
Yeah, a lot of teams to climb over, but all you need is one good hot winning streak and one good hot losing streak by the other team above you, and you can move up quick. So it's going to be an interesting August and September.
Yeah, I was calling for a 10-game win streak by the Phillies there. They had won the first 2 games in Washington, so I wrote on my blog, it'd be nice for an 8 to 10 game win streak out of this. And of course, they dropped the next 2, so we'll have to see what happens with that. But it's going to be interesting as these weeks roll on here, and we'll be here talking about it.
Most certainly will be.
Well, thanks everyone for listening to this show, MLB This Week with Gary and Rich. We'll be back next week with a whole lot more of talk about baseball. Again, don't hesitate to contact us. Go to our website, MLBThisWeek.com. Send us an email with your thoughts and suggestions for a story, and we'll try to cover it. Gary, have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.